friends. My name is Belle, and I've come to talk to you today about how children's grief is represented in famous and popular movies, such as within the wonderful world of Disney and Pixar. So when I was thinking about it, I went through my wonderful Disney movie collection, and there were so many instances of different movies and stories that I could think of where death was either explicitly mentioned or was implicitly implied. Some Disney movies, however, like Big Hero 6 and Onward and Frozen 2, talk more explicitly about the death that has occurred in the family and what that means for the surviving children. So Disney has a great way of bringing a really tough topic into means that children can understand. Disney has a wonderful way of celebrating what different experiences children have and families have. Coco was a more recent film that came out that really does celebrate death and shows what it means in a different cultural context. Another great movie, if you haven't seen this, I would really recommend it, Inside Out. It is wonderful at teaching emotions to children and what those feelings and emotions might look like and really normalizing those. I think this movie is very important within the grieving process for children and their families. As we've talked about before, sometimes our brains, when we're feeling overwhelmed or when we're dealing with something heavy like grief, our brains don't process in a rational, logical way sometimes. A lot of times we are processing information within colors and shapes and characters. And that's kind of how I view this movie to be so helpful, is for a little, it might be easier to picture a mad character than actually be able to identify, okay, I'm feeling really overwhelmed from this loss and I'm feeling really angry. It's really hard to go through the process, the thinking process, and rationalize, why am I thinking this way? What am I thinking this way? A movie like Inside Out definitely gives relatability, and it's easier to identify maybe what you're feeling when you see a character do it than having to have that internal understanding and awareness of the feelings that you might be feeling inside. Another wonderful movie, and my personal favorite, is the Disney Pixar film Up. In this movie, death is explicitly talked about and experienced with the main character, Carl, his wife, Ellie, dying. I wanted to share with you guys some amazing resources provided by one of the pillars in our community, Aaron's House. They have created grief talking points for Disney and Pixar films. So if you're watching one of these movies with a client, if you're watching one of these movies with a family member or your own child, these provide some really wonderful talking points and really spark that conversation and become a catalyst for understanding maybe how the child is processing and how the child is grieving. So I just wanted to go over one of them, since Up is my personal favorite. Something that it says in here is Carl and Ellie's dream is to travel to Paradise Falls together. As a family, you can talk about things you wish you could have done with your person who died, or places you wish you could have gone to. You could also talk about plans to still do some of those things as a special way to honor your person. It also speaks on how Carl is initially resistant to embrace his relationship with Russell. He eventually opens his heart to him. Explore with your child if it has been difficult for them to invest in their relationships with others after the death. Help them find ways to work through their feelings and take steps towards feeling safe to open up to others and express themselves. I think these talking points, which, like I said, they're available on the Aaron's House website, are wonderful resources to pairing the popular culture of Disney movie and Pixar movies and really utilizing them to the benefit of the child who is grieving. They help normalize feelings. They provide wonderful talking points and discussion points for families and helpers that can really help the child see their grief through means that are more relatable and understandable for them. So, not to hate on another fellow Disney princess, but Snow White brings up a really important caveat that I think is notable and mention worthy in this conversation about Disney films and other children's films and children's grief experiences. One thing that we need to keep in mind is that children, depending on age and developmental level, may have a difficult time understanding the permanence of death. This can be compounded by when they're watching films such as Snow White and she eats the poison apple and she is in the casket in the forest, and then a kiss brings her back to life. This can be confusing for children, and it's really important that we start the conversation when age appropriate with children that death is permanent, and explain things that we see in movies and television shows and even things that we read in books, that while this is just a story, death really is permanent. And that is one of the warden's 4 tasks of mourning, is understanding that a death has occurred, and part of that understanding is recognizing its permanence.